19 is a long,
We're in 20.
long chapter.
You're in 20. Okay, good morning. We're continuing our Bible study. We're in Genesis chapter 20. Let me give you a little background before we get to chapter 20. God has reaffirmed the commitment with Abraham, several times now, and promised, the birth of Isaac in a couple of months. Now, back in our story a little while ago, after the first covenant kind of renewal, Abraham ended up in Egypt, and rather than trusting God to take care of him and Sarah, he told Sarah to tell the Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister, because he was afraid that if Pharaoh knew that Sarah was his wife, that Pharaoh would kill Abraham and take Sarah. And in fact, what did happen is that Pharaoh did take Sarah into his harem. Now, we have to remember, this is kind of interesting because when we initially read that God called Abram for the first time, he was already 75. Okay, so we got to assume Sarah's about that age too. So we're not talking about some 20-year-old virgin. Okay, so it's kind of interesting that Abraham has all these concerns, but at any rate, God spoke to Pharaoh and said, "You've got Abraham's wife, and if you don't turn her back, your whole country is going to be destroyed." So Pharaoh immediately called Abraham and said, "Why'd you do this to me? Take your wife." And Pharaoh gave Abraham a lot of wealth and livestock and servants, etc., etc. So Abraham ended up becoming quite wealthy out of his inability to trust God. Well, time has gone on, and we've had several covenant renewals. God showed up with a couple of angels the other day and told Abraham and Sarah, this time next year you'll have a child. And then remember a couple of chapters ago, God allowed Abraham to negotiate with him about the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, all the way down to if God could find 10 just people, God wouldn't destroy the city. Well, all God could find was a couple, so the city was destroyed. And so we read last week about how Lot and his daughters went up to the hills, and his daughters lay with Lot when he was drunk, and had offspring, so they could continue the command, be fruitful and multiply. So that's where we are. So we're in chapter 20, and we're going to have another problem here with Abraham. Chapter 20. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." Same thing. Why? And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. This is confusing on a number of levels. The main one being that Abraham has a huge company. Remember, he just not too long ago won a war against 5 kings. Okay, so I'm not sure why he's so afraid of Abimelech, unless Abimelech has some massive army. But at any rate, he does the same thing. He's afraid that Abimelech is gonna kill him and take Sarah. Don't know why. I mean, Sarah's close to 100 now. But the point is, Abraham, again, is not trusting God to make sure that the promise God made will come true. I mean, obviously, if God is promising a son from Abraham and Sarah, then Abimelech is not going to mess that up. But Abraham, fully human, I guess, fully scared, not coming off so well in this moment. So Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you're a dead man." You don't want God to tell you you're a dead man, because the woman whom you've taken, she is a man's wife. Now Abimelech had not approached her. That means they hadn't done anything yet sexually. So he said, "Lord, will thou slay an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, she's my sister? And she herself said, he's my brother. In the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Abimelech is saying, "I didn't know. He said brother and sister. Why would I doubt that? I don't know why he's lusting after Sarah, but at any rate. Um, Verse 6, and God said to him in the dream, yes, I know that you've done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against her. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. So God was the one who, for whatever reason, tamped down Abimelech's ardor that first night. Good for Abimelech. Verse 7, now then restore this man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours. God doesn't play. God's saying if you don't give Sarah back, your entire retinue, family, whatever, are going to be wiped out. The interesting thing is that by giving Sarah back, Abraham's going to pray for you, that is, intercede for you, and you shall live. It's not, the fault is not Abimelech, the fault is Abraham. He's the one to put Sarah in this dangerous position, not Abimelech. Okay, Abimelech's just doing what kings do. Okay, they see women and they just take them. Okay, this is not new behavior. Verse 8, so Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and told them all these things, and the men were very much afraid. Yeah, if God says God's gonna wipe you out, I'd be afraid too. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said, what have you done to us? And have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done. He's true, of course, to a point. When we don't know if Abimelech would have taken her anyway. The assumption is that Abimelech would not have taken another man's wife. I mean, that's kind of what he more or less says in the dream. But I do think this whole thing was set in motion by Abraham in his life. And getting Sarah to to go along with it. Verse 10, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what were you thinking of that you did this thing? Abraham said, I did it because I thought there's no fear of God in all this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, and listen to this, besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So what is she? She's his half-sister. So I guess Abraham's trying to kind of blur the line here and say, I really wasn't technically lying. I just didn't say she's my half-sister. Okay, he's trying to weasel out of it. Verse 13, and when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do me at every place to which we come. Say to me, he is my brother. Okay, that's new because there's nothing back in the Genesis 12 when this whole story starts where Abraham, before he, once he said yes to God, there's nothing in that in Scripture where we have a little interlude between Abraham and Sarah where Abraham says to Sarah, okay, we're going to go, and we're going to go into dangerous territory where kings are used to just taking women. So what you're going to do is you're going to tell everybody, you're my sister. This is Abraham writing back, trying to justify his, what I consider to be extremely cowardly behavior. Where am I? Okay, verse 14. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored Sarah, his wife, to him. Again, just like a Pharaoh, Abraham is coming out enriched because of this little episode. Verse 15. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you. In other words, pick the best land and you can have it. To Sarah he said, behold, I've given your brother, a brother, half-brother, husband, 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your vindication in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are righted. So yeah, Abraham got even richer. Okay, I guess this is a good strategy. Tell rich kings, your wife is your sister, and then when he takes her before he can, consummate, God comes in, stops it, and terrifies the king, and then you get lots of money and animals and slaves. Verse 17, then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so they bore children. What do you mean healed? What happened? Well, here's what we find out, verse 18. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So we didn't hear that before, but apparently what God has said to Abimelech, um, not only am I going to wipe you all out if you don't give Sarah back, but between now and then, um, none of your women are going to be able to get pregnant. Of course, if we can't get pregnant, then we're going to die. The community will die. So that's a death sentence right there. So after Abraham prays, God heals and reverses the curse of the closed womb. Interesting episode. Now this is going to really be important in chapter 22, which we'll get to next week. But we'll go ahead and do chapter 21 right now. Abraham is still, that is, showing himself unable to fully trust that God is going to take care of him and Sarah. So 21. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. What's that? And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God has spoken to him. So not only are Abraham and Sarah close to 100, and not only, of course, is Sarah way past the time to bear a child, and not only is she infertile, okay, and yet what? We have a child. As I said to you before, when this is a familiar biblical trope, and when these things happen, we know this child is going to be special, and of course he's the heir of the promise. He's one of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, okay. Verse 3, Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. How old is Sarah? Can't be much younger. 95. Okay. Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. Yes, because as a barren woman, she has been dismissed and devalued all these years, and now she's got a son. Verse 7, she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So the promise, what? Kept. God is a promise keeper. God makes promises and keeps them. Verse 8, and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. So, how old is Isaac? He's weaned. How old would that be? We could say like 3, 4, even maybe 5. We wean kids really early now, really early. But back then there was no formula, okay? And until a child was old enough to actually eat solid food and stuff, their only food was breast milk. So we're not talking about a 6-month-old. We're talking at least about, preschooler, 3 or 4 or so, I would say. And so, the Ishmael is playing with the baby. Ishmael is what? I don't know. He's older, okay, several years older. Let's say, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, something like that. But Sarah doesn't like it. So she said to Abraham, cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman should not be heir with my son Isaac. Now she's concerned maybe that Isaac and Ishmael have to split the inheritance. Maybe there was something in the play that disturbed her. We don't know. It's all speculation. At any rate, she tells Abraham, get him out of here. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the lad and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For through Isaac shall your descendants be named, and I will make a nation of the son of your slave woman also, because he's your offspring. So God is saying 2 great nations are going to come out here, one from Isaac, one from Ishmael. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, Ishmael is considered to be, by Muslims, the father of Muslims. Just like, Abraham is considered the main father, but Ishmael, from Ishmael comes Muslims, from Isaac comes the Jews, and then, of course, Christians. So the 3 great monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, all claim Abraham as our faith father. Of course, Muslims and Jews claim him as their biological father. We claim him as our spiritual father. So Abraham's going to do what Sarah says. What's that saying? Happy wife, happy life. Okay. So 14. So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin of water, gave it to Hagar, put it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. This business of putting Ishmael on Hagar's shoulder, that doesn't make any sense. Kid's got to be at least 6 or 7. She ain't going to carry him. But the idea is that they're off they go, out into the wilderness, presumably to die. But either Abraham is trusting God, that's not going to happen, or he's more afraid of Sarah, and off goes Hagar and Ishmael. Verse 15. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down over against him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Let me not look upon the death of the child." I mean, this is a horrible scene. Her child's laying over there, apparently weak because of no food and water. And she don't want to, she presumably is also going to die. No food or water. But she don't want to be there. That's horrible. As she sat over against him, the child lifted up his voice and wept. So, Ishmael at least has enough strength, to call out. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? For fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is." Now, we don't want to take from this that God didn't know what was going on, and that it wasn't until God somehow heard a little small infant cry that God said, "Oh, wait a minute. I forgot about Hagar and Ishmael." No. In the Bible, when we read God hears, that's just another way of saying God is getting ready to act. It doesn't mean that God was somewhere absent and couldn't hear. Okay, that would be absurd if we're going to believe in a God who's all powerful, omnipotent, all wise, all that sort of stuff. But this is to create this interchange between Hagar and God and this promise. Okay. Verse 18, "Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Here's another promise, and the great nation is the nation of Islam. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water all of a sudden, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink, and God was with the lad, with God. That means blessed, okay? And he grew up and lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Because remember, Hagar's from Egypt. So, again, another intertwining of Egypt and Israel, the ancient foes. Some of you may remember when peace was made with Egypt, how Anwar Sadat was assassinated because of that. Okay, but it's a peace that still holds. Those ancient enemies, okay, made peace. So we're going to have a little switch here. Verse 22, "At that time Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, 'God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my offspring, or with my posterity, but as I have dealt loyally with you, you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned.' And Abraham said, 'I will swear.'" So Abimelech, I guess, is feeling like a little anxiety about the possibility of maybe Abraham attacking him or something. But anyway, he reaches out, makes a treaty, so they made a treaty. Verse 25, "When Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, 'I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today.' So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart, and Abimelech said to Abraham, 'What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set apart?' He said, 'These 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, and you may be witness for me that I dug this well.' Therefore the place was called Beersheba, because there both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines." So we're going to assume that Abimelech is the commander of the Philistines. The Philistines become consistent enemies of Israel all the way down, to Samson, if I recall correctly. So, what do we have here at the end of this section? We have peace between Abraham and the nations among which he is living. He still doesn't own the land. The land is still populated with lots of other people. Okay, but we have this. We have the son of the promise, Isaac, and we have Hagar. We have Ishmael, the first son, born of the slave woman Hagar. He's taken care of as well. So it looks like things are all peaceful, and it's just a matter of Isaac growing up, and then getting him a wife and continuing this line of the chosen people. But not as Lee Corso used to say, not so fast, my friend. We're getting ready next week to get into chapter 22, one of the most famous chapters in the entire Bible. In fact, it has its own name called the Akedah, which means the test. And it's so important that on our little calendar we were doing at school, I noticed that there is a day in the month of May that is designated a day to remember this exact event that we're going to talk about next week. And I'll say in closing, I will say more on this next week. My mom hated this passage. But once again, because no preacher ever explained it to her so she could understand it in the context of the larger story. But then I will do that for you next week. So next time, the Akedah. Peace. By the way, don't catch Ebola, okay? Peace.